Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, last week I spoke about samatha meditation. So this week I'm going to move on and to the other major category of meditation, which is VIpassana meditation. Usually referred to in English as insight. The first point I would like to make is that the word Vipassana is not something that's really found in the suttas. I think there's one or two occurrences in the Sutta Pitaka. It's more of a commentarial term. And it actually refers to a state of mind rather than a meditation. It means a clear seeing. And when people speak about doing Vipassana meditation, what it actually refers to is doing a kind of meditation that will encourage or facilitate that state of mind. Okay, I mean, this is sort of a subtle point, but I think it's important that there is a tendency, I think, in some people to become attached to technique and form to a degree that approaches rite and ritual clinging, Silabata Paramasa. There are several well-known methods of which has historically been very prolific in teachers who come up with methods of meditation, very technique-oriented approach. Two of these methods have become very popular in the West, and now there's a third one that's also gaining ground of these Burmese methods. One, which was actually probably, I think it was the first to come into the West, was the Mahasi method, introduced by Mahasi Sayadaw. And then the Goenka method, introduced by the lay teacher Goenka. And in recent years, Pa Auk's teachings have also, I would add that to the list, as Burmese techniques of Vipassana. The only one I'm really qualified to speak on is the Mahasi method. It's the only one I've personally been trained in and have practiced. So I'm going to mostly focus on that. But first I'd like to talk about the general state of mind that is Vipassana. When you are observing in an equanimous, unattached way, my end, it still hasn't sent me any error messages, and my it still has the light on to say that it's transmitting. Oh, I don't know what's going on. Okay, so I'm back again. I had no indication on my my computer that anything was broken. Okay, vagaries of the internet. Where was I? I think I was talking about maintaining mind in its natural state, letting the chitta just uh, observe the objects that arise to consciousness. In every moment, what's occurring is that there is an object, and consciousness is aware of that object. These are the two sides. It's the fundamental duality, the last duality to go, is subject-object. There's an object and there's mind knowing the object. And VIpassana is trying to make that process fully conscious. So that requires that the mind be in equanimity, and not be caught in an analysis. It's difficult for to do this normally, people, because it's not the habit of mind, but it's actually a very natural state of mind, because it's all the chitta does is be aware of objects. That's the sole function of chitta, is conscious awareness. All the other stuff that happens, the feelings, the emotions, the thought forms that are spun out, those are this difficult at first, is that we can easily get caught in acting to an object. If a memory comes up, for example, it may be a happy memory or a sad memory, a regret, something like that, the tendency is to feel an emotional response. And actually that could be natural and normal, but the VIpassana approach would be to also observe the emotional state as an object. That's very difficult for some people. They get caught in their emotional reactions. If you identify with it and treat it as something more important than other objects, then you're losing the thread of VIpassana. You won't hold that objective position, and know that nothing which arises is so trivial it can be ignored, and nothing that arises is more important, is so important that it needs to be held or dealt with. Now I'm getting messages about my connection. If I start messing around, I'll just drop the whole thing out. I want to risk it. I want to try seeing if I can find out where the. I don't even know where to go. It's not letting me get into manage or anything like that. I was just using the default. I didn't change the resolution. This is making me lose my track with this. Sorry about that, folks. Stumbling around here. Okay. So I was talking about maintaining equanimity, not being caught by the objects. Nothing is so trivial it can be ignored, and nothing is so important it needs to be held. And this is something that requires some training, some inner discipline. Because the tendency is for something to arise in the mind that's emotionally resonant, and this seems very important. I've got to deal with this. And then you've lost the thread is to be treated as an object. And that includes an emotional state or a thought form. So this is all centers around the quality of equanimity. Now, Eka in Pali is a quality that has a lot of different contexts and has some nuance. And there's always a Dhamma. There's a stream. As long as we're still in the conditioned world, consciousness is always taking a stream of Dhammas, one after the other. And equanimity is being clear about that, and uninvolved, unmoved, detached. And there's a specific term that's used in the Abhidhamma for this kind of equanimity. That's Tatra Majjhatthata, which has been translated, I think Bhikkhu Bodhi coined the translation, specific neutrality, which is very precisely what it means. But a literal breakdown of the roots of the word would translate it as the state of being in the middle about that. That's the Tatra part. Tatra, Majja is the middle, as in like Majjhima Nikaya's middle length sayings. So Tatra Majjhatthata. Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, that's the specific part, specific neutrality. What's required for doing Vipassana that actually progresses, that actually gets results, is not just neutrality of observation, but specific neutrality. Meaning that the noticing has to, that's good in theory, but I think what that often leads to is sitting in a kind of a haze. And and this, moving on to the specific technique of the Mahasi method, this is where I think the Mahasi method, using what's generally called the noting technique. The instructions, if you're new to the practice, the Mahasi method practice, I'll first give the standard for the sitting meditation, and it's usually done alternating sitting, walking. For the sitting meditation, you begin by placing your awareness on the breath at the abdomen. And in this practice, it's different than the samatha we talked about last week. Perspective of the whole bowl of the belly, so to speak, and watch that moving. And the reason given for that is you don't want to be too one-pointed, too focused, because you're not trying to exclude other objects completely. This isn't the samatha meditation, and you actually don't want to go into jhana if you're doing vipassana meditation. So you're aware of this physical process arising and falling of the abdomen, and then you make a gentle shift in the mind and allow other objects in, and that we spoke about. You note it, meaning you very lightly and subliminally quickly attach a label to it, categorize it as thinking, feeling pain, remembering, feeling mentally. And you just continue doing that from periods of time when you're just sitting on the belly and you're not noticing very much happening, to other periods of time when the mind is very busy. So the walking practice is similar, except you don't use the breath. You use the sensation of walking at the soles of the feet. And the unnatural walk in that you don't, you see, you're moving the right foot, you leave the left foot flat. You don't begin to move it until the right foot is finished. You walk back and forth. And if the mind gets very busy while walking, it's advised that you stop and meditate standing and observe the objects until, the aspect that requires some discussion, I think, is the noting aspect. A lot of meditators struggle with this. They have difficulty. They're not quite sure how to do it, or they do it wrongly, and they find it frustrating or difficult. The first thing to remember is that the noting is very, very secondary. It's like a trick you're playing on yourself to make sure you've actually seen the object. And if you, as I said, if you just try and be aware without any kind of discipline or technique, then the mind can tend to just get very fuzzy. You're not noticing anything specific. Everything's sort of a big mush. But if you follow this technique, then you're trying to hone in on each individual object one at a time. Some guideline for noting. It's not really important or critical that you note anything correctly, so to speak. It's just that you've noticed it, you've seen it, right? So just throw a label on it. And generally, it's better to use verbs as far as possible rather than nouns, to keep them very short and succinct. It can also help to categorize things a bit more. Like using the label thinking is so broad; it can cover so much. So it's useful to separate thoughts of the past from thoughts of the future. So remembering versus speculating, planning, whatever, or imagining, daydreaming, to try and be a little bit more specific. But still, just to keep it very quick and light and subliminal, just so you're just barely doing it. Another point about this is that if you get to the point in your practice where the noting is actually slowing down the noticing, things are being noticed too quickly to label them, then just drop the noting. It's just a training device to develop the specificity of noticing. That's the purpose of it. It's not important in and of itself, but it is a very powerful technique for developing that attribute of specificity. To say a few more things about VIpassana meditation in general, and the ways I've seen people get kind of mixed up with it. One very common misstep or wrong practice is to confuse VIpassana with self-psychoanalysis. There was an article about this that I read years ago in a in a book about a collection of articles about Buddhism and psychology, and there was only a couple of the articles that I thought were really good, and this should be about process, not content. Okay, so if you have a memory come up in the mind, the content of the memory is not important. It's what you're looking at. Now we all always have a tendency to want to get caught up in our drama and our story. All that stuff is quite irrelevant to the purpose of Vipassana. We're trying to understand the difference between subject and object. That's a huge insight. If you can clearly see subject and object. And the approach of being centered in the chitta. Because as I mentioned previously, the chitta, the knowing aspect, the subject, is just that. That's all it does. It just knows objects. It's very pristine and simple, and has no reaction in itself. Reaction is another object. They would speak about finding your true home, being in the chitta. Now, this approach is, compared to the Burmese approach, it's actually doing the same thing, but speaking about it from the opposite angle. Because if, starting with the Burmese approach, if you're clearly aware of each object arising to consciousness, then that means you must be centered in the chitta. That's the only way to do that. And finally, I'd like to just make maybe the main source of the Vipassana teachings, and it's also being the primary site for Abhidhamma studies. Burmese Buddhism is particularly marked by these two things, Vipassana and Abhidhamma. And that's not really accidental, because the two are very much wedded together. They're two sides of the same coin, so to speak. Vipassana is a discipline, and Abhidhamma is the attempt to explain that intellectually. So you'll find, if you read Burmese masters like Ledi Sayadaw or Mahasi Sayadaw, that they speak in Abhidhamma based on observing the stream of dhammas. And the Abhidhamma gives them a vocabulary and a context to put the experiences into. So I would recommend, if you are serious about practicing Vipassana and progressing Vipassana, it wouldn't hurt to study some Abhidhamma as well. So I'm sure there's a lot more to say about this topic, but I'll stop here now and try to deal with any questions that come up in the comments. Very bad. I'm sorry about that. Next time I do a stream, I'll set the resolution down. We've had no problem previously. Yeah, we'll see, Ted, if how the it automatically. I've got it set to automatically put these up on my channel afterwards, and hopefully that'll be whole without interruptions. It gave me on this end. It gave me no indication that it was any trouble. Except once at the very beginning, it came up. Your connection is unstable, and that was right in the very first few minutes, and then it dropped out and never gave me any indication. Mm. No, I answered that question. My opinion would be that Vipassana falls mostly under Samasati, but I think it also has aspects of Samasamadhi and Samadhi. Okay. Okay. Are there any additional questions? Is there a must-have manual for the layperson to have regarding Vipassana? Uh, I think there's to my taste, there's nothing better in English than Mahasi Sayadaw's writings, and I would start with the basic and progressive stages, um, and then, or I think it's basic and progressive insight, maybe I can't remember the exact title, and uh, there's also, I mean, there's many books written by people in his school and his tradition, but I would go to that original source. What a Vipassana jhana is. The Vipassana jhana, that's controversial. That's a term that has come up only in recent decades in some of the writings about Vipassana. Um, uh, it's a way of kind of paralleling the four jhanas with the stages of insight, and it sort of works, I think, but I don't think it's necessary as a concept. I think to my opinion, this is strictly my opinion, but I never use that term. I think it kind of muddies the water, confuses things. How long does one continue to note before noting is no longer necessary? Yeah, that's a good question. The stream may have cut out while I was speaking about that, but I thought I kind of answered that. When you're doing Vipassana and it's working well, and you're noticing objects clearly and distinctly, discreetly, and quickly, then the noting can slow you down. It can bog you down, and it's not advised to hold on to the noting at that point. Just be aware of the objects without labeling them. And you can always pick up the noting again if the mind becomes fuzzy or distracted, then you can bring it back. But when it's like the sutta, the parable in the sutta about crossing the river with a raft. Right? You don't climb out on the far bank with the raft on your back, but you need the raft to get across the river. So you need the noting establishes you in that state of clear seeing and precision. Then, it's working now. I can drop the noting. It's like, think of it like training wheels on a bicycle. Right? It gets you there, but then it slows you down if you continue to use it. How does Vipassana relate to concept on access samadhi? Yeah, if you refer to this is getting into a little bit of technicalities and esoterica, but if you refer to these Burmese writings that I spoke about, Mahasi Sayadaw, Ledi Sayadaw, and that whole tradition, they say that the degree of samadhi or concentration or focus, whatever you want to call it, of the mind for doing Vipassana is they call it momentary access concentration. Now, the access concentration or neighborhood concentration, these are terms from the Visuddhimagga. Is not found in the suttas. In the Visuddhimagga's technical details about how one enters jhana, that there is a state of mind that's you could say pre-jhana, it's almost jhana, and they call that access samadhi, and that degree of is what the Burmese masters say the mind has for a single moment repeatedly. Like it's not in the samatha meditation, that would be on a single object, right? Like the breath or like a sina or whatever it might be. But with insight meditation, it's a stream of distinct, separate, different objects. But each one is a degree of focus of access concentration. What is the oldest commentary on Anapanasati that you know of? Well, that would be the Atakata, the original commentaries. And that one has been translated into English. You can find it. Not all the commentaries have been translated, but you can find the Anapanasati commentary. I would look on BPS website. I can't remember what the, what it's called, but there's a number of them that were published at one point with the sutta and the commentary. The name was just commentary to the Anapanasati Sutta or Anapanasati commentary. Just type it. Well, it's the same as the sutta. Anapanasati commentary. In Pali, the commentaries are called Atta Kata, but that's a term to refer to all the commentaries. Would it be of interest? I'm always looking for topics for these talks. Would it be of interest to do a talk on scriptures, on the structure of the Pali literature, suttas, commentaries, and so on? Would people be interested in that, or is that too kind of nerdy? We got one upvote for that suggestion. Okay, more people are chiming in. Yeah, I'll do that sometime. Maybe not next week. I was thinking next week maybe doing Brahma Viharas to kind of complete this cycle of major meditations. Okay, well, I wish you all a good day. I think I'll sign out now, and hopefully by next week it'll be a better connection. No, the talks are not on Wednesday anymore. We and I didn't send out an email about it. You see the notification on your YouTube page. They're going to be every Thursday at 6. Unless I get a lot of complaints about that time, then I'll switch it again. But some people didn't like it was too early on the Wednesday. And then when I asked, some people said they didn't like Wednesday evening. They want another day, so I just said Thursday, and that's what we'll do for the time being. Unfortunately, I think with this later time, we lose some of our our friends from far away that are in places where this is in the middle of the night. Okay, I'll take my leave. Yeah, Mars. I know you, Mar. He's messing with my satellite dish. Okay.